Hey folks, it's Joe at Emerald City Orchids, and we're going to do a little video this week because it is the middle of summer here in the great Pacific Northwest, and it's a long way away from the tropics. So we want to talk a little bit about how you grow these orchids outside of tropical zones, because a lot of these plants come from areas near the equator, and in those areas they don't get 4 seasons the way that we get 4 seasons here in Washington State. What happens more often than not is you'll get like a wet season, dry season type scenario or something like that, but there's really not the 4 seasons of winter, spring, summer, fall, and then back to winter again. It's a lot different. And these plants have evolved to have this day shift where the shortest day of the year for them is maybe 11 and a half hours and the longest day is 12 and a half hours. Here in Washington State, where we have our nursery in Tacoma, Washington, the shortest day of the year in the middle of winter, it's like 9 or 10 hours of daylight. It's not much light. And in the summer months like now, the sun comes up real early and it goes down real late. We're talking about 18, 19 hours of light. It's a long day. And so it changes how you grow these plants. So first of all, I brought some things to show you guys. This is Phalaenopsis schilleriana. This is an equatorial plant. It grows in areas where it's very hot and humid, and it doesn't want too much light. But here in the Pacific Northwest, we have a couple of problems with this plant. One is in the middle of winter, this plant doesn't dry out fast enough. It's not able to churn through enough light or enough water with the limited amount of light that it has. And it's also it's not able in the cooler temperatures to dry out fast enough. So we do a thing where if it's planted in moss, we actually take out the top of the moss and we put bark in there instead, just in the top part, so that the bit that's against the plant in wintertime, it keeps it on the drier side so that the plant doesn't rot in the winter. Now, we know a very fine grower in Texas that grows this same plant, same type of plant, and they do the exact opposite of what we do, where they put bark on the bottom, and in the top part they have moss, and that moss is to stay wet against the plant so it doesn't get too dry in summer, right? So we have to make adjustments according to our growing zone. Here we also have that dramatic shift in light that I was talking about, and I brought a really neat equatorial thing. This is Epidendrum schumanianum. This thing grows right at the equator, right? And this epidendrum, you can see, got a new little growth coming out here at the bottom, right? A little baby bit right there. And this one's interesting because if it's dark, this plant will grow taller because it's reaching for light. In nature, where it grows, it often starts in a shrub, and it'll grow until it gets to the layer of the shrub. If the shrub is just this tall, this is the part where it starts making leaves, and the shrub would be under here, and that's where all these little babies would spring out under the shrub. And then it grows up, and once it starts getting to light, the leaves will actually come out more compact, right? So you can see here these two different canes, and one's got smaller leaves and it's a little taller, and one's got the rhizomes are wider and the leaves are bigger, right? And that's because one part grows when it's shadier, and the other part when it's brighter and sunnier. So the plant's growing according to the light that it's getting. Now, this thing grows in full sun at the equator, but it only grows in full sun at the equator for 12 hours a day, which means that when it gets here to the Pacific Northwest, we have these 18-hour days. This plant is doing great in full sun all the way up to 5 o'clock. And then it gets to 5 o'clock, hey, ooh, good day, guys, it's time for bed. But all the evergreens in our area are like, oh no, buddy, you got to buckle up your chlorophyll because we got another 6 or 8 hours of photosynthesis to do. And this plant sometimes will freak out and burn. So here in the Northwest, even for full sun plants, we have to put up shade cloth. You'll see all around the nursery in summertime in here, it looks like a pirate ship with all these swatches of black fabric that are here to take the light out. Because even full sun plants here in the summer are going to need a little bit of shade. Now, a lot of these plants here under natural light really struggle with our winter days because they're just barely getting enough light. So you have to sometimes supplement. If you're going much farther north from here, you have to supplement and add light with LEDs or whatever you can do to get the light up on some varieties. Now again, with a lot of these orchids in nature, their seasons are totally different. If you can do a little bit of research and find out what your orchid does, where it comes from as far as the climate, for example, if it has a wet season, dry season, find out if you can when that wet season is and when the dry season is. Because oddly enough, a lot of things go through their dry season in winter, right? So they like to be colder and drier, but also brighter, which is weird in the Northwest because we can get cold and we can get dark, but we also have wet. So if you don't water and you can find a way to up the light, there's a lot of things that actually really like the cold around here. So you can grow some beautiful orchids in areas where it gets cold, but you got to know what you're doing with those things. So we're talking about plants like a lot of Cattleya varieties, dendrobiums, some different types of the Vanda Alliance. These are plants that in the higher altitudes, especially in the tropics, they get quite cold, and they can also oftentimes get very dry in the dry season. And if you can match that temperature dip with when they like to get dry, you can get some really amazing results. Some dendrobiums, for example, if you get them cold and dry in winter, they flower so much better in spring. There's dendrobiums growing in the Himalayas, okay? Mountain orchids. So look some of that stuff up. Now, they're not all the same. Sometimes it's a mountain thing, and sometimes it's a low altitude thing. And the rainy season, wet season changes in different tropical zones depending upon all kinds of things like the trade winds and whatnot. So find out a little bit about what you can about what the plant wants from its natural environment. And you can really take advantage of our colder temperatures here to make a lot of those things bloom. But a plant like this here in the nursery, where we're growing in a greenhouse that is not total control, it's just insulation from nature. We have longer days in summer and shorter days in winter for these equatorial things. That means that we here at Emerald City Orchids have to adjust our water cycle. This plant gets watered almost every day at this time of year. And if it's a real scorcher, a very hot day, we'll sometimes water it in the morning. We'll water it again in the afternoon when it's getting really hot, somewhere around 3 o'clock. But our water here is two types. We have a surface water where we just kind of mist the plants and get the surface of everything wet. And then we have the deep water where we really try to soak it and get water down in the pot, down in the roots. In the summer, a lot of times if we're watering twice a day, we're doing surface watering because we don't want to rot the roots. The roots still got to drain away like orchids normally like their roots draining away. So make sure that you're not waterlogging the plants trying to keep them cool if that's what you're doing. Everyday water in the summer, and then in winter, if it's real cold, this thing might only get water once a week, right? Because our temperature here, some areas it gets down to 50, 55. Some areas we keep a little bit warmer, over 60. Some areas we have to keep over 65. And that's about the most we can afford to do with the Pacific Northwest winters. So the plant like this and a lot of these other plants, we're a little crazy here at Emerald City Orchids because we're growing everything. We're growing everything. We're trying to grow every single type of orchid under one roof in an area that is not in the tropics. So there are a lot of challenges involved, but if you can learn to adjust your watering and learn to adjust your light, you can really get away with a lot because these orchids are flexible and they will adjust to longer days of light if you give them less light over that day, and they will adjust to longer, warmer days if you can give them a little bit more water. They will photosynthesize their way through that whole day. So you can get your orchids from the tropics out of their 12-hour cycle if you just do a little bit of homework and just do a little bit of work and make sure that you're respecting that difference in night and day length between the summer and the winter. It takes a little while, especially if you're new to the area, but it's definitely possible. We've got bare root vandas in here. You can do anything as long as you take the appropriate steps. Follow us for more helpful videos. We're going to be dropping some very interesting ones about some developments happening at the company here pretty soon, things happening in our lab and whatnot. A lot of really cool stuff happening at Emerald City Orchids. Come along for the adventure, and thank you for following.